The autumn wind threw yellow leaves through the windows of my house on Hillcrest Avenue. I watched them stick to the glass, as if begging to be let in, and I thought that we were the same, lonely, unneeded, outdated, 68 years old. Who would have thought that in South Charleston, where everyone knows each other, I would feel so alone? Third fall without Henry. He used to rake the leaves in the yard, make huge piles, and then burn them, filling the air with a special bitter aroma. I'd bring him tea with lemon and honey, and we'd sit on the porch and watch the flames. Now that smell of burning leaves always brings tears to my eyes. I ran my hand over the faded wallpaper in the living room. This house remembered better times, the laughter, the holidays, our lives. Henry and I bought it 42 years ago, when we were a young couple with big plans and tiny savings. The old Victorian house required endless repairs, but we put not only money into it, but our souls. Every creaking floorboard held a story. This is where Naomi took her first steps. This is where she threw tantrums as a teenager. This is where she left, slamming the door and declaring she was never coming back. Naomi, my only daughter, my punishment and my joy, my eternal headache. The phone rang, breaking the silence of the house. I looked at the screen. Naomi. They say a mother's heart always feels. Apparently, thoughts materialize. Mom? Her voice sounded strangely excited. There's someone I want you to meet. It's, it's serious. That's how I first heard of Benjamin Prescott. They arrived 3 days later, Naomi and her new boyfriend. I set the table in the dining room, got the best china I only used for special occasions. I cooked the roast beef that Naomi had always loved, though I doubted she remembered it. The doorbell rang at 6 p.m. sharp. On the doorstep stood Naomi with a new haircut, in an elegant dress that must have cost as much as a month's rent, and a tall young man with attentive eyes and a white-toothed smile. Dash, Mrs. Abbott. He held out his hand first. Benjamin Prescott, I have heard so much about you. At last we meet at last. His handshake was firm, confident, and there was something in his eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. Come on in. I stepped aside to let them into the house. Wow, what a house. Benjamin whistled, looking around. It's classic American architecture, and in a neighborhood like this, you must be very proud of it. It's a family home, I replied, noticing his gaze glancing at the antique clocks, paintings, and antique furniture as if assessing their value. At dinner, Benjamin was a model of politeness. He helped set the table, poured wine, and inquired about my life in South Charleston. He talked about his work at the law firm, nothing specific, more about his prospects and ambitions. Benjamin has a great future, Naomi said proudly. He's working on important cases. I watched my daughter. She looked at Benjamin with an adoration I hadn't seen in her eyes in 20 years. I wanted to be happy for her, but something was clawing at my consciousness. How did you two meet? I asked, arranging the dessert on the plate. At the fundraiser, Benjamin answered before Naomi could open her mouth. I noticed the most beautiful woman in the room and realized I had to meet her. Too smooth, I thought, too rehearsed. Ben and I want to get married, Naomi suddenly blurted out, looking at me defiantly. I froze with my spoon in my hand. You've been dating? 3 months, Naomi answered. When you know it's fate, time doesn't matter. Benjamin added, taking her hand. I looked at their intertwined fingers and felt anxious. Naomi had always been impulsive. But this? 3 months? Are you sure? I asked cautiously. Marriage is a big step. Mom. Naomi rolled her eyes. I'm 34. Don't lecture me. I understand your hesitation, Mrs. Abbott. Benjamin interjected in a conciliatory tone. But I assure you, I love your daughter with all my heart, and I'd do anything to make her happy. I nodded, swallowing all objections. It was useless to argue with Naomi. She always did the opposite. After that meeting, Benjamin became a frequent visitor to my house. He showed up with flowers, sometimes without Naomi, just to check on my future mother-in-law. He brought cakes from an expensive pastry shop, inquired about my habits and health, asked for advice on gifts for Naomi. He knew how to make a lonely older woman feel comfortable. One day he was looking at the pictures on the mantelpiece. "It's a beautiful house," he said, gently picking up a picture of Henry and me, standing in front of our home. "It must be worth a fortune now." "I hadn't thought about it," I said. "To me, it's just the house where I've lived my life." "Of course," he smiled. "But in troubled times like these, it's good to have a solid asset. Real estate is the best investment." I felt a chill. He was talking about my house as an asset. "Did Naomi tell you that you own the house outright? No mortgages?" "My husband and I paid it off over 20 years," I replied, taking the picture from his hands. "That's wonderful," he exclaimed. "By the way, have you made a will yet? At your age, it's important to have it done properly." He paused, noticing the look on my face. "Sorry, professional deformity. We lawyers are always thinking about paperwork. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. Something about Benjamin alarmed me, a perfect facade behind which I sensed an emptiness. But Naomi was happy. Maybe I was just jealous, or was senile suspicion clouding my judgment? I decided to give Benjamin a chance. After all, a daughter is entitled to her life and her mistakes. Preparing for the wedding had become a nightmare. Naomi insisted on a lavish celebration, even though she was earning an average income as a graphic designer. And Benjamin was, in his words, putting everything into promising projects. "Mom, you could help with the expenses," Naomi said during another discussion about the wedding. "After all, I'm your only daughter." "I'm already paying for the banquet hall rental and catering," I replied. "That's a lot of money." "But the dress. I need a special dress. And the honeymoon? Ben says the Maldives is the perfect place right now." "Naomi, I'm living on a teacher's pension. I don't have that kind of money." "But you have a house, Dash," she exclaimed. "You could take out a loan against it." I looked at my daughter in bewilderment. "I'm not mortgaging my house for a wedding dress and a trip to the Maldives," Ben says. "What's Ben got to do with it?" I interrupted. "This is a family conversation." "Then Ben will be part of the family soon," Naomi snapped at me. "He says that the house is just walls and that a daughter's happiness should be more important to a mother." I felt a wave of anger rising inside. "What else does Ben say about my house?" Naomi faltered, realizing she'd said too much. "Nothing. It's just, he cares about our future. Your future or your future?" I asked quietly. "What do you mean?" Naomi tensed. "Nothing. Just be careful." I regretted my words as soon as they were out of my mouth. "You're always like this," Naomi flared up. "You always think I can't make up my own mind. You always think everyone is using me." "That's not what I meant." "No, that's exactly what I meant." She grabbed her bag. "You're jealous that I found a man who loves me, and you're alone." She ran out of the house, slamming the door. Typical Naomi, hitting me where it hurts. That night, I got a call from Benjamin. "Dash Mrs. Abbott, I wanted to apologize for Naomi. She can be emotional sometimes. Weddings are a stressful time for everyone." "It's okay," I replied tiredly. "I talked to her about the finances," he continued in a honeyed voice. "I convinced her that we could do with a more modest celebration. It's not about the money, is it?" I was relieved, mixed with disbelief. Maybe I was wrong about him. Maybe he really does care about Naomi. "Thank you, Benjamin." "Please call me Ben," he said quietly. "You know, I really hope you and I become a real family. I've always lacked a mother figure in my life. I caught myself thinking that he was too good at playing on emotions, but I shook it off. By the way, he added casually, I'd like to discuss the legal aspects of real estate ownership with you sometime. It's purely a professional interest. Perhaps I could give you some useful advice on tax optimization. I didn't say anything. There was a pause. Well, I gotta run. Good night, Mrs. Abbott. His tone was upbeat again. I'll see you at the costume fitting. You'll be there, won't you? Of course, I answered automatically. I hung up and sat staring at the phone for a long time. Outside the window, the rain was pounding on the roof of the house that had suddenly become the center of strange attention. The wedding was 2 months away. I could feel the invisible threads tightening. Naomi was getting more and more nervous. Benjamin was getting more and more attentive to me, and I realized more and more that there was something suspicious behind his smile. One day, going through old albums, I came across a picture of Hugh Lancaster, an old family friend, a former detective with the South Charleston Police Department. We hadn't spoken to each other for several years, since he moved to a neighboring town after retirement. Hugh was always a good judge of character. I wondered what he would say about Benjamin. I set the photo aside, thinking it was worth renewing an old friendship, just in case. Are you sure you want to wear that? I asked, looking at my reflection in the mirror of the salon's fitting room. The pale lilac-colored dress with the high waist and jacket with tiny rhinestones seemed too flashy for a mother of the bride. I would have preferred something more understated, but Naomi insisted. Mom, this is a wedding, not a funeral, my daughter retorted, adjusting the sleeve of my outfit. You have to look presentable. Besides, this color goes with the overall scheme of the celebration. I remained silent. Over the past weeks, I'd learned to keep quiet when it came to weddings. Any comment I made, even the most innocuous one, was met with an earful from Naomi. She had become a real bridezilla, cranky, demanding, dissatisfied with everything and everyone. Ben is very worried that everything has to be perfect, Naomi said, as if reading my mind. He says that first impressions are very important to his coworkers and partners. Isn't the wedding about you two? I couldn't stand it. Naomi gritted her teeth but remained silent, a rare case of self-control on her part. Benjamin must have coached her after our last fight, when I'd refused to pay for a musical ensemble that cost as much as a used car. And now the day had come. September 23rd, a day that should have been a happy day for my daughter, but for some reason caused me only anxiety. The ceremony was held in the ancient Anglican Church of St. Paul's, one of the most expensive wedding venues in South Charleston. I sat in the front row with my back tensely straightened as if I'd swallowed a mop. Next to me was an empty seat reserved for the father of the bride. Henry hadn't lived to see the day, and I was suddenly acutely aware of his absence. He'd always been a better judge of character than I was. Naomi was beautiful in her gown from a famous designer, flowing silk, hand embroidery, long train. I looked at my daughter and caught myself thinking that I didn't recognize her at all. When had she become such a cold and calculating woman? Benjamin stood at the altar in an impeccable tuxedo, exuding confidence and charm. He smiled his signature smile that would make most guests' hearts sink. But not me. I'd seen him nervously adjusting his cufflinks before the ceremony and whispering with some stunted man in a cheap suit who was clearly out of place among the invitees. Who is this man? I asked in a whisper to my cousin Naomi, who was sitting next to me. I have no idea, she shrugged. Some friend of Ben's, I guess. The ceremony passed like a blur. I mechanically stood up and sat down when everyone else did, repeated the words of the prayer, and smiled when someone's gaze fell on me. Inside, however, I was gnawing with anxiety, growing stronger by the minute. After the exchange of rings and the traditional kiss, everyone was invited to the Golden Pine restaurant, where the banquet room had been reserved for the reception. I was seated at the head table next to Benjamin's parents, a prim Midwestern couple who seemed to feel as uncomfortable as I did. "Your son is a very charming young man," I said to Mrs. Prescott, trying to make conversation. "Yes, just like his father," she answered mechanically, but something like doubt flashed in her eyes. Ben always knew how to make an impression. "Has he been in the legal field long?" "Not long," Mr. Prescott interposed, casting a warning glance at his wife. "But he has great promise." The conversation wasn't going well. I noticed that Benjamin's parents were careful to avoid specifics, answering in generalities. They spoke sparingly about their son's childhood, as if they had agreed in advance to stick to a certain version. Benjamin, meanwhile, shuttled between the tables, charming the guests. I watched him stop by a group of men in expensive suits, obviously colleagues or potential clients, and tell them something animatedly, gesturing with a glass of champagne. Among them was the short man from the church, now clearly tipsy. Suddenly, Benjamin's gaze met mine. He smiled and walked over to our table. "Mrs. Abbott, you look radiant today." He leaned over and kissed my cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and alcohol. "How did you like the ceremony? I hope everything was on point." "Very beautiful," I replied demurely. "Naomi looks happy." "Oh, she's thrilled," he winked. "By the way, how do you like my friend Corey? That short guy at the bar. He was so thrilled when I told him about your house. Said it was one of the most beautiful Victorian-style buildings he'd seen in South Charleston." I tensed. "Is your friend interested in architecture?" "More like real estate." Benjamin took a big sip of champagne. "He's an appraiser." "The best in the business. Says your house could be worth a fortune if presented correctly." "I don't plan to sell the house," I retorted. "Of course you are." He held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Just an FYI. You never know how life will turn out, right?" He winked and withdrew, leaving me with an unpleasant residue. Why was he bringing an appraiser to my house? And when was that? Lunch devolved into dancing and toasting. I sat at the table watching Naomi and Benjamin twirl in the newlyweds' first dance. My daughter looked genuinely happy, and for a moment I allowed myself the hope that maybe my fears were unfounded. Maybe Benjamin really does love her, and all this strangeness is just the result of my suspicion. But then I noticed him whispering with Corey again, glancing furtively around, as if he didn't want to attract attention. Something was off about this conversation. The faces were too tense, the gestures too abrupt. "They make a lovely couple, don't they?" came a male voice from beside me. I turned and saw a gray-haired man in a strict suit. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, but I've heard a lot about you from Ben." He held out his hand. "Simon Hall, Ben's partner in the firm." I shook his hand, noting the tenacious gaze and assessing squint. "Nice to meet you." "Ben's told me a lot about you and your lovely home," he continued, taking a seat next to me uninvited. "They say it's a real gem in South Charleston." "Benjamin seems very interested in real estate," I remarked dryly. "Oh, he just admires beautiful things." Simon smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "And family values. You know, he often says how important it is to provide for a young family's future. It's so difficult these days, buying a decent home, starting from scratch." "Benjamin is quite successful as far as I'm concerned," I parried. "Of course he is. But there are ups and downs in our business." He lowered his voice. "Between you and me, the last few months have not been the easiest. But they're temporary difficulties, I'm sure, especially now that he has such wonderful support in the form of Naomi and you." He gave me a meaningful look and walked away, leaving me even more perplexed. What was this? A warning? A hint? The evening continued. The guests grew noisier, the music louder. I felt more and more out of place. Twice I wanted to leave, but each time Naomi intercepted me and told me to stay at least until the cake was cut. Benjamin, meanwhile, had clearly had too much champagne. His movements became less polished, his voice louder, his laughter more raucous. He was no longer hiding, discussing something with Corey and a couple of other men in the corner of the room. Finally, it was time to cut the cake. The three-tiered confectionery marvel was wheeled out to the center of the room, and the newlyweds posed with knife in hand, smiling for the photographer. I stood back, looking at my daughter, beautiful, radiant, but so foreign. "Mommy, come to us." Naomi called out, noticing me. "We need 3 generations worth of photos." "2," I corrected myself, stepping closer. "2 so far." Benjamin winked, putting his arm around Naomi's shoulders. "But we plan on fixing that quickly, right, dear?" Naomi smiled embarrassedly, and I felt the color flood my cheeks. Could it be that they were already planning children? Somehow that thought didn't bring joy, only anxiety. The photographer took a few pictures, and we each cut off a piece of cake. Benjamin insisted we get more champagne. "To family," he proclaimed, clinking glasses with me. "To strong family ties and family values." His gaze slid behind me, and I turned around. Corey was sitting at one of the far tables, now openly drunk, looking at something on his phone. "What exactly was your friend's interest in my house?" I asked bluntly, determined to finally clear the air. Benjamin looked confused for a moment, but quickly pulled himself together. "Oh, just a professional interest. Corey admires the old architecture. He also says the neighborhood where you live is at the height of its popularity right now. Prices are going up like crazy." "And how does he know exactly where I live?" "I think I mentioned the address in conversation," Benjamin replied nonchalantly, but I noticed the muscles in his face tense. "You know, Audrey. Can I call you Audrey? Now would be a good time to think about the future. About your future." "What do you mean?" I felt everything go cold inside. "Well, you're not getting any younger." He said it as mundanely as if he were commenting on the weather. "A big house that requires constant upkeep. It's hard on a single woman of your age, isn't it?" I was numbed by this cavalier attitude. "Besides," he continued, taking another sip, "Naomi is your only heir. Sooner or later, the house will pass to her anyway, which means, effectively, to us." "Benjamin, I don't understand why we're having this conversation." My voice shook with indignation. "Just thinking out loud." He shrugged, but his gaze remained tenacious. "You know, there are such wonderful nursing homes, with medical care, entertainment. You'd be more comfortable there than alone in a huge empty house." "I prefer my own empty house," I retorted. "Of course you do," he smiled indulgently. "But think about it. Naomi and I could visit you there every week, and we'd settle into the house. A young family with prospects. Wouldn't that make sense? You want grandchildren, don't you? They need room to grow." I opened my mouth to reply, but that's when Naomi came up to us. "What are you two whispering about?" she asked, putting her arm around Benjamin's waist. "Discussing the future," he replied, kissing her on the temple. "Our shared bright future." "Sounds mysterious," she smiled, but I could see the tension in her eyes. She clearly sensed the conversation wasn't a pleasant one. "Your mom's just worried that she'll be lonely in the big house when we leave on our wedding trip." Benjamin cleverly twisted away. "Mom's used to being alone." Naomi threw me a quick glance. "She's independent." "Too independent," Benjamin muttered, finishing his champagne. "But we'll fix that, won't we, dear?" Naomi laughed nervously and pulled him to dance, clearly wanting to break up the awkward conversation. I was left alone, feeling the ground go from under my feet. Now I knew for sure that Benjamin Prescott had his sights set on my house, and it looked like he was already making plans to get rid of me. The rest of the evening passed like a blur. I smiled mechanically as guests approached me, but my thoughts were far away. I pondered Benjamin's words, his veiled hints, his strange surroundings. Something didn't add up in this picture. Around midnight, when most of the guests had left and the rest were too drunk to notice anything around them, I saw Benjamin talking to Corey again. This time, their conversation looked tense. Corey was arguing fervently, waving his arms, and Benjamin was frowning and shaking his head negatively. I stealthily moved closer, trying to hear their conversation. "We can't wait that long," came to me through the music. "They're already wondering where the money is." "I'll handle it," Benjamin cut off. "There's a plan." "What kind of plan?" "The old woman clearly isn't going to—" Benjamin stopped abruptly, noticing me. His face instantly transformed, no longer tense, his trademark smile. "Audrey, you're still here. How wonderful." He stepped toward me, shadowing Corey. "Let me introduce you to an old friend of mine. Corey, this is the mother-in-law I've told you so much about." Corey nodded awkwardly, avoiding looking me in the eye. "Nice to meet you," he mumbled. Corey was admiring the pictures of your house I showed him. Benjamin continued, not letting me get a word in edgewise. "Such architecture, such a location." He even said it was the perfect place for a young family. "Right, friend?" Corey nodded, clearly feeling uncomfortable. "Yeah, it's a great house," he coughed. "Ben said you might be thinking of moving?" "Ben is wrong." I glared at my newfound son-in-law. "I'm not planning on moving anywhere." "Oh, come on. That's just talk." Benjamin laughed nervously. "No one's chasing anyone anywhere. Right, Corey?" But Corey was already backing away, muttering something about needing to leave urgently. "Excuse me." Benjamin gave me a strained smile. "I need to escort a friend out. He's had a little too much to drink." He hurried after Corey, leaving me with even more suspicions. What exactly was Benjamin up to? And who was this Corey guy really? I decided it was time to leave. I looked for Naomi to say goodbye, but she was too busy talking to her bridesmaids. She just waved absent-mindedly at me, not taking her eyes off the conversation. As I was on my way out, I was intercepted by Benjamin. His eyes glittered feverishly, and his movements became less coordinated, a clear sign of severe intoxication. "Leaving already, Mom?" It was the first time he'd ever called me that, and it sounded like a sneer. "What about the last dance?" "I'm tired, Benjamin. It's been a long day." "Yeah, long." He swayed, gripping the wall. "But productive. You know, I'm really glad we're one family now. One big, happy family." He said the last words in such an odd accent that a chill ran down my spine. "Think about my offer." He leaned closer, wafting the scent of alcohol over me. "A nursing home isn't so bad, and Naomi and I will take care of your home. After all, you don't have any other heirs anyway. Who else would you leave the house to if not your own daughter?" I pulled away, feeling the anger boiling up inside. "Good night, Benjamin. Congratulations on your wedding." He grabbed my hand, squeezing harder than he should have. "You do realize this is what's best for everyone, right? Naomi deserves this house. We deserve it." I yanked my hand out and walked quickly toward the exit, feeling his gaze burn down my back. In the cab on the way home, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending disaster. Something told me that Benjamin wouldn't stop at talking and hinting. And worst of all, he clearly implicated Naomi in his plans. When I got home, I couldn't sleep for a long time, replaying the day's events in my head. Strange conversations, suspicious personalities, hints about Benjamin's financial problems. What was behind it all? And what should I do next? Early in the morning, I pulled out my cell phone and found Hugh Lancaster's number. Maybe an old friend could help me make sense of the situation. At least it was worth a try. I didn't yet know that very soon I would have to enlist his help in much more dramatic circumstances. I woke up to the ringing of the phone. It was barely dawn, and for a moment I thought yesterday had been a nightmare. But the caller quickly dispelled that illusion. Mom? Did you remember lunch today? Naomi's voice sounded strained, as if she was speaking through force. What lunch? I rubbed my temples, trying to gather my thoughts. Oh my God, Mom, we've been discussing this. A luncheon to celebrate the end of the wedding for the closest family and friends. At the River Garden at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I really didn't remember any discussion. Apparently, it was just another item on the endless list of wedding events that I had overlooked. I'm not sure I can make it, Naomi. I don't feel well after yesterday. A pause hung. I could practically see my daughter counting to 10, holding back her irritation. Mom, she finally said with feigned calm, this is important to Ben. His co-workers who couldn't make it to the wedding will be there. He really wants to introduce you to them. Why? I blurted out. What do you mean, why? You're my mother and part of his family now. After yesterday, I got the impression that Benjamin is more interested in my house than I am in myself. Again the pause, longer this time. What are you talking about? Naomi's voice sounded wary. Your husband has been implying all evening that I should go into a nursing home and my house should go to you. Ben was just joking. Naomi replied quickly, too quickly. He has a peculiar sense of humor. He was very nervous, wanted to make a good impression, and had a little too much to drink. That doesn't sound like a joke, Naomi. And his friend, this Corey guy? Mom, please, she interrupted me. Don't you start. Yesterday was our day, and you're ruining it again with your suspiciousness. Just come for lunch today, okay? 1 o'clock in the afternoon, River Garden. Don't be late. She hung up without waiting for my response. I remained sitting on the bed, staring at the phone in my hand. Something told me that today's lunch wasn't going to do any good, but not going meant ruining my relationship with my daughter. And deep down, I still hoped I was wrong about Benjamin. The River Garden restaurant was on the banks of the Canova River, in the most picturesque part of South Charleston. It was an expensive establishment known for its fine dining and panoramic views. I parked in the parking lot at 1 o'clock sharp, mentally preparing myself for the challenge ahead. At the restaurant, I was met by a hostess who escorted me to the enclosed terrace. 20 people were already gathered there. All the guests were seated at a long table, laden with glasses and plates of appetizers. Naomi and Benjamin took center stage, as befitted the celebrants. Mom! Finally. Naomi waved her hand at me, feigning joy, but I noticed her shoulders tense at my appearance. Benjamin was smiling too, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. He had clearly sobered up after last night and was putting on his charming son-in-law mask again. Audrey, we're so glad you could make it. He stood up to kiss me on the cheek. Let me introduce you to my co-workers. This is Mr. Donaldson, the senior partner of our firm. And this is... He began listing names that immediately flew out of my head. I mechanically smiled, shook hands, and said the usual phrases. But inside me, I was growing uneasy. Why would Benjamin introduce me to all these people? What kind of game was he playing? I was seated next to an elderly lady who turned out to be Benjamin's mother. Mrs. Prescott looked tired and lost. She barely touched her wine glass and barely participated in the general conversation. Your son looks very happy, I said, trying to make conversation. Yes, very. She cast a quick glance at Benjamin, who was laughing loudly while telling something to his co-workers. Naomi seems like a nice girl. I hope she knows what she's getting into. The phrase sounded so sudden that I almost choked. What do you mean? Mrs. Prescott seemed to wake up and looked at me fearfully. Nothing in particular. It's just that marriage is always complicated, isn't it? So many compromises. She clearly regretted her frankness and hurriedly turned away, pretending to be interested in her conversation with her neighbor to her right. I remained puzzled, but my suspicions were strengthened. Something was wrong with Benjamin Prescott, and his own mother knew it. The waiters began serving the first courses. Benjamin, seated at the head of the table, tapped his fork on his glass, drawing attention. Dear friends, I want to thank you for sharing this special moment with us. Naomi and I's wedding is the beginning of a new phase in our lives, and we're delighted to have the people closest to us here with us. He raised his glass, and everyone followed suit. I took a sip of wine as well, watching Benjamin continue his speech, now addressing his co-workers. Mr. Donaldson, I'm especially grateful for your support. I know the past few months have not been easy for our firm, but I am confident that things will improve very soon. I have certain assets that will help us out of this crisis. At the word assets, his gaze stopped on me for a moment, and I felt a chill run down my spine. He was talking about my house. I was sure of it. Lunch continued. I barely touched my food, mentally counting the minutes until I could leave. Benjamin was getting busier and busier. He drank a lot, laughed loudly, and constantly interrupted others to insert his opinions. I noticed some of his co-workers exchanging awkward glances. Did you know that my mother-in-law lives in one of the nicest houses in South Charleston? He suddenly announced, interrupting someone's story. A real Victorian mansion, antique furniture, stained glass windows, carved railings, worth a fortune. All eyes turned to me. I felt paint flood my face. Benjamin, I don't think the guests are interested in hearing about my house, I said quietly. On the contrary, he objected, pouring himself more wine. Mr. Donaldson is precisely interested in real estate, isn't he, sir? The older man at the other end of the table nodded awkwardly. And you know what? Benjamin continued, raising his voice. My mother-in-law lives there all alone. Can you imagine? Such a huge house, and for just one person. While young families like Naomi and me are forced to cram into tiny apartments. Ben, don't, Naomi whispered, putting her hand on his wrist. But he shook off her hand and continued, no longer hiding the irritation in his voice. I suggested she move into a cozy nursing home. There's medical care nearby and companionship, and the house would go to Naomi, her only daughter and legal heir. Doesn't that make sense? There was an awkward silence at the table. All the guests were looking either at their plates or at Benjamin with poorly concealed confusion. Benjamin, this is not a topic for public discussion, I said as calmly as I could, though inside I was seething with anger and humiliation. I think it's a good time. He pounded his fist on the table, making the glasses bounce. Everyone should know what a selfish woman you are. You cling to a house that has long since become beyond your means, just out of stubbornness. And Naomi and I could have started a real family there, raised our children. Ben, stop it! Naomi tugged at his sleeve, but he shoved her away roughly. No way. Let everyone know the truth. Your mother only thinks of herself. She never cared about your happiness. Naomi turned pale and pulled away, as if she'd been slapped. I saw a mixture of fear and embarrassment in her eyes. She clearly hadn't expected such an outburst from her newfound husband. Benjamin, you're drunk, I said quietly but firmly. I think we should all separate. I'm not drunk, he jumped up, knocking over his chair. I'm perfectly sober, and I'm saying what I've been meaning to say for a long time. You're a selfish old witch, clinging to your house like it's the last straw. But this house should belong to us. A young family needs it more. His face turned red with anger, and the veins in his neck swelled. He no longer tried to hide his true nature. The mask of the charming son-in-law finally came off, revealing a greedy, aggressive man. My house isn't for sale. I stood up, getting ready to leave, and I'm not going to move anywhere. Don't you understand? Benjamin grabbed my arm, holding me in place. I need this house. You have no idea the situation I'm in if I don't find the money soon. He paused, realizing he'd said too much. There was dead silence at the table. Even the waiters froze with their trays, not knowing how to react to this scene. Let me go, I said quietly, but there was steel in my voice. Benjamin froze for a moment, looking at me with unconcealed hatred. Then, with a sudden movement, he grabbed a glass of red wine and spat it in my face. Choke on your house, you old hag. The cold liquid burned my eyes, ran down my cheeks, soaked into my blouse. I gasped in shock and humiliation. There were shouts of outrage, and someone jumped up from their seat. Naomi covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Mrs. Abbott, do you need help? A young waiter jumped up to me with napkins. I silently took them, wiping my face. The red wine was leaving indelible stains on my light-colored clothes, like the marks of the sudden violence I'd suffered. I'm fine, I said, though it wasn't true. I need to use the restroom. I headed for the door, feeling dozens of eyes escort me with sympathetic glances. Behind me, I could hear someone reprimanding Benjamin, snapping at him, Naomi crying. But it all sounded like cotton candy. My ears were ringing and my eyes were blurry, whether from the wine or the tears I was holding back. In the restroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale with red sweat, my blouse ruined, my hair disheveled. I looked exactly how I felt, humiliated and crushed. But suddenly, looking at that reflection, I felt a wave of anger rise up inside. No, I will not let some lowlife ruin my life and take away my home. I will not let him humiliate me and manipulate my daughter. With trembling hands, I pulled my cell phone out of my purse. I scrolled through my contacts and found a number I hadn't dialed in years. Hugh Lancaster, former detective with the South Charleston Police Department, the man I trusted the most in this town. My heart pounded as I pressed the call button. What would I tell him after all these years of silence? Would he believe me? And would he be able to help? Lancaster here, came the familiar husky voice after the third ringtone. Hugh, it's Audrey Abbott. My voice shook. I'm sorry for the sudden call. I I need your help. A second of silence, then, Audrey? Oh my God, it's been ages. It's been winters. What happened? I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. My daughter has gotten married, and I'm afraid her husband is a dangerous man. He's threatening me, wanting to take my house. Just now he poured wine on me in front of all the guests because I refused to give him the house. Where are you now? Hugh's voice became instantly serious. At the River Garden restaurant, in the women's restroom. Stay there. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I heard the sound of a door slamming shut and an engine starting. Hugh had always been a man of action. Thank you, I whispered, feeling tears of relief come to my eyes. And Audrey, he added before passing out, don't go out to those people. Wait for me. I think you'll be interested to know that your newfound son-in-law is an old acquaintance of the South Charleston Police, and I have a whole file on him. The connection dropped, and I was left standing with the phone in my hand, feeling a strange mixture of fear and hope. So my suspicions were right. Benjamin Prescott was not who he said he was, and Hugh knew something important about him. I washed my face with cold water, trying to wash away the sticky traces of wine and soothe my burning cheeks. In 10 minutes, everything would change. In 10 minutes, Benjamin Prescott would regret ever stepping foot in my house. The mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. Pale face with red spots, wine-stained strands in her hair, a ruined blouse. But there was a fire of determination in her eyes that I hadn't seen there in years. I remembered my mother's words. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to push yourself back up to the surface. Well, Benjamin Prescott had just pushed me to the bottom. Now it was my turn to resurface. I had 10 minutes before Hugh arrived, 10 minutes to pull myself together and return to the hall with my head held high. I would not let Benjamin enjoy my humiliation. I won't let him think he's broken me. I found a spare shawl in my purse, an old habit of always having something warm with me. It didn't match my outfit, but it covered most of the wine stains on my blouse. I rinsed the wine residue off my face, blotted my hair with paper towels, and applied some lipstick, the only makeup I had on me. Looking at myself in the mirror once more, I took a deep breath. "You're stronger than you think, Audrey," I said to myself. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. When I returned to the auditorium, there was a tense silence. Benjamin sat in his seat, grim and angry. Naomi looked lost and scared next to him. Most of the guests were clearly uncomfortable, but no one was in a hurry to leave. It was human nature not to miss the denouement of this drama. I walked through the hall, feeling dozens of stares, and sat down in my seat. No one said a word. Even Benjamin seemed too dumbfounded by my return to continue his attacks. "Mom," Naomi said quietly across the table, "maybe you should go home. You look tired." It was her clumsy attempt to salvage the remnants of the situation, to shove the problem, me, away so she could pretend nothing had happened. "I'm fine, honey," I replied calmly. "I wish I could stay." I saw Benjamin grit his teeth. His plan wasn't working, to humiliate me enough to make me run away in tears. Instead, I sat across from him, calm and collected, enduring his hateful stare. "Why don't we order dessert?" one of the guests awkwardly suggested, trying to lighten the mood. "Excellent idea," I seconded, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. The waiter came over to take my order, carefully avoiding looking at my wine-stained blouse. Conversations at the table resumed, but now they were quiet and strained. I noticed some of the guests exchanging glances, clearly discussing what had happened. Benjamin leaned over to Naomi and whispered something in her ear. She shook her head, but he insisted, grabbing her wrist. I saw her wince in pain. "Let her go, Benjamin," I said louder than I intended. All heads turned in our direction. "Stay out of our business," he snapped, but he let go of Naomi's hand. "This is my daughter," I replied firmly. "Anything that concerns her concerns me. Your daughter is my wife now." He raised his voice, "And you'd better remember that." I decide that. The sound of the door opening interrupted his tirade. A tall, gray-haired man in a strict gray suit entered the room. His movements were confident and precise, like a man accustomed to command. In his hands, he held a tattered leather folder. Hugh Lancaster had changed over the years, became grayer, on his face added wrinkles, but his posture and penetrating gaze remained the same. Even at 66, he looked imposing. His gaze immediately found me in the crowd. He nodded slightly, then shifted his eyes to Benjamin, and I saw his face tense. "Who's that?" Benjamin asked tensely, sensing something wrong. I didn't have time to answer. Hugh had already approached our table, and now all eyes were on him. "Good afternoon," he said in a deep voice that sent shivers down my spine. How many times in the past had I heard that voice calming anxious townspeople or questioning suspects? I apologize for the intrusion. "Who are you?" Benjamin jumped up from his seat, his face contorted with anger. "This is a private event." "Hugh Lancaster," He said his name calmly, but I noticed Benjamin flinch. Did he know who Hugh was? Former detective with the South Charleston Police Department, retired now. What do you want? Benjamin's voice grew higher with tension. Hugh put the folder on the desk and looked at me. Audrey asked me to come over. Did you call the police? Naomi stared at me with an expression of utter betrayal. Hugh is an old friend of mine, I replied, feeling a quiet confidence growing inside, and I thought he might be interested in meeting your new husband. Benjamin turned pale. His gaze flicked to the folder in Hugh's hands, then to the door, as if he were calculating whether he could escape in time. You have no right to interfere in our lives. He tried to regain control of the situation. Leave at once, or I'll call the real police. Call them? Hugh offered calmly, opening the folder. I'm sure they'll be glad to finally talk to Benjamin Prescott. Or should I call you Brandon Pierce? Or perhaps Barton Price? There was dead silence at the table. I saw Naomi turn slowly toward her husband. Her eyes widened with incomprehension. Ben, what is he talking about? Benjamin stood as if struck by thunder. Large drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. There's some kind of mistake, he muttered, but his voice sounded uncertain. No mistake. Hugh pulled some photographs out of a folder and spread them out on the table. Benjamin Prescott, also known as Brandon Pierce, also known as Barton Price, master of reincarnations and financial fraud. Charged with fraud in 3 states, but each time he slipped away before trial. Specializes in single women with good real estate. Everyone at the table, including me, stared at the pictures. Benjamin was in them, a little younger, with a different haircut, but undoubtedly him. It's a fake, shouted Benjamin, trying to grab the photos, but Hugh deftly pushed them away. You set this up. It's a conspiracy against me. Mr. Prescott, interjected an older gentleman whom Benjamin had earlier introduced as Mr. Donaldson, a senior partner in his law firm. What's going on? Are you really who you say you are? Benjamin looked around at everyone with a hunted look, clearly not knowing what to answer. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of his control. Ben? Naomi's voice trembled. What does he mean? Why do you have different names? I can explain. Benjamin grabbed her hand. It's just a misunderstanding. This man is trying to smear me in front of your mother. They're conspiring. Hugh pulled another document out of the folder. Could this be a misunderstanding, too? An arrest warrant for Brandon Pierce, issued in the state of Ohio 2 years ago. Charges: fraud, forgery of documents, misappropriation of property. He handed the document to Mr. Donaldson, who studied it carefully. This is an official document, he said slowly, raising his eyes to Benjamin, with the seal of the Hamilton County Court. A forgery, Benjamin shouted, but his voice trailed off. Could this one be a forgery, too? Hugh pulled out another piece of paper. Statement from one Eleanor Whitfield of Cincinnati. Quote, Brandon Pierce gained my trust by posing as a financial advisor. After 3 months of acquaintance, he convinced me to invest all my savings in a non-existent investment fund. When I demanded my money back, he disappeared. The total amount of damages is $150,000. Naomi covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. I wanted to go over and hug her, but I was afraid I'd spook the moment of truth. Or here's another. Hugh continued pulling documents out of his folder. A statement from Martha Jenkins of Lexington, Kentucky. Barton Price posed as her probate attorney, convinced her to rewrite her will, appointing himself executor, and then attempted to sell her house using a forged power of attorney. Mr. Donaldson rose slowly from his seat. I take it you're not a real lawyer? His voice sounded deceptively calm, but I could see the white knuckles of his fingers gripping the back of his chair. Benjamin didn't answer. He looked like a hunted animal, eyes darting from side to side, sweat beading on his forehead, hands shaking. And you've never worked at the law firm of Donaldson and Associates? The older man continued. Worked, Benjamin muttered, in the administrative department. But I've been taking law courses. I almost got my degree. You lied to me. Mr. Donaldson shook his head. I hired you, entrusted you with confidential client information. I can make this right. Benjamin went on a desperate offensive. I just need money, lots of money, and fast. I have a plan to sell Audrey's house. It's worth a fortune. We can share. Shut up, Mr. Donaldson shouted. I'm calling the police. He pulled out his phone, and Benjamin finally realized the gravity of his situation. His eyes darted toward the exit, but Hugh, as if reading his mind, stood up to block his escape route. Don't do anything foolish, Prescott, he warned. You don't want to add resisting arrest to your record as well. Ben? Naomi's voice was barely audible. Tell me that's not true. Tell me you didn't deceive me. Benjamin looked at her, and for a moment his face softened. I even thought that maybe he had some real feelings for Naomi. But then he was back to his old self, calculating and cold. Everything could have worked out if it hadn't been for your damn mother, he spat out. We could have sold the house, paid off our debts, and started a new life somewhere else in another state. But she proved too stubborn. Naomi recoiled from him like a blow. So our relationship, the wedding, was all because of my mother's house? Benjamin didn't answer, but his silence was more eloquent than any words. How much do you owe? Naomi asked quietly. What difference does it make? He jerked his shoulder. I'm curious. Her voice sounded strangely calm. I want to know how much you sold my life. Benjamin averted his eyes. 200,000, plus interest. And to whom? Doesn't matter. It matters, Hugh interjected, because it doesn't appear to be a bank loan we're talking about. Otherwise, you wouldn't be acting so desperately. I remembered Corey, a nervous man with a dangerous look, and his words at the wedding. They're already wondering where the money is. You borrowed from some gangsters, I guessed. Benjamin flinched, and I realized I'd hit the mark. They gave me 2 weeks, he muttered. After the wedding, they said it was either money or... He stopped talking, but everyone understood the unspoken words. There was a heavy silence in the hall. Everyone realized that they were dealing not just with a crook, but with a man embroiled in dangerous criminal connections. That's why you were in such a hurry to get married, Naomi spoke to herself, putting the pieces of the puzzle together. That's why you insisted on a lavish celebration with powerful guests. You wanted to impress your creditors, show that you had everything under control. I'd pay it all back. Benjamin tried to take her hand, but she jerked away. After we'd get the house, some of the money would go to pay off the debt, and the rest. The rest, I interjected. Did you really think you could sell my house, pay off the bandits, and still have money left over? The house is worth at least 500,000, he blurted out. Maybe even 600. Corey appraised it. Corey is the appraiser who was at the wedding? Hugh clarified, making a note in his notebook. I wonder what he has to do with your creditors. Benjamin turned even paler, realizing he had said something unnecessary. At that moment, sirens sounded. A police car was approaching. Mr. Donaldson had time to call the law enforcement officers. You're all gonna regret this, Benjamin shouted, finally losing his temper. Especially you, Audrey. You think you've won? That you've ruined my plans? But you don't know anything. I have connections. There are people who... Who what? Hugh interrupted him calmly. Threatening a witness in the presence of 24 people? Not the smartest move, Mr. Prescott. or whatever your real name is. Two policemen entered the hall. Hugh showed them his ID card. Apparently, it still carried weight with the South Charleston police, and briefly explained the situation. One of the officers approached Benjamin. "Sir, come with us." "On what grounds?" Benjamin tried to maintain the remnants of dignity. "You don't have a warrant for my arrest." "Actually, I do," Hugh interjected, handing the officer a paper from his folder. "The warrant from the state of Ohio is still valid, and it's about to have new charges added to it: fraud, forgery, threats." The policeman looked over the document and nodded to his partner. They took Benjamin under the arms. "You have the right to remain silent." One of the officers began to read the rights. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Benjamin stopped resisting. He allowed himself to be handcuffed and led toward the exit. Only at the door did he turn around and look at Naomi. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Not everything was a lie. But Naomi turned away, making it clear she didn't want to hear his excuses. As the police officers led Benjamin away, a heavy silence hung over the room. The guests didn't know how to react to what had happened. Some began to awkwardly say goodbye and leave, while others gathered around Naomi, expressing sympathy and support. I stood to the side, watching my daughter. She held herself remarkably collected for someone whose life had just fallen apart. While her friends comforted her, I approached Hugh. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I don't know how you managed to gather all that information so quickly." He grinned, gathering the documents back into the folder. "I've been following this guy for a while now. When he showed up in South Charleston a few months ago, something about him struck me as familiar. I ran him through the databases. Old connections still work, and found some interesting matches to unsolved fraud cases in neighboring states." "And you kept quiet?" "I had no proof, only suspicion. Besides, I didn't know he was connected to you or Naomi. It's a big city. I've been out of your hair for a long time." He was quiet for a moment, looking me over with a soft smile. "But when you called, all the pieces fell into place. I just picked up a folder from home and drove over. Good thing I live nearby." "You saved us." I touched his arm. "I can't imagine what would have happened if you hadn't intervened." "It's okay," he shrugged. "After all, types like Prescott always give themselves away sooner or later. He's already started to snap. It's only a matter of time before he does something even more stupid." We looked at Naomi. She was sitting with her arms around her head, surrounded by her friends, but she seemed so alone. "It's going to be hard on her," Hugh remarked. "Yes," I agreed, "but she's strong. Much stronger than she thinks she is. After all, she is my daughter." I walked over to Naomi and gently touched her shoulder. She lifted her head, and I saw a mixture of pain, anger, and confusion in her eyes. "Mom," she said hoarsely, "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything." I sat down next to her and put my arms around her. For the first time in years, she didn't pull away, but snuggled up to me like she had when she was a child. "I was such a fool," she whispered. "How could I not see? Not understand?" "He was very persuasive," I replied. "Such men know how to charm. But you saw right through him. From the beginning, I did not deny the obvious. A mother's instinct, I guess." Naomi smiled weakly through her tears. "What am I supposed to do now?" "All these people, the wedding, his parents. One step at a time." I hugged her tighter. "Tonight we'll just go home and rest. And tomorrow we'll start dealing with all of this." "Home," she repeated, and I realized she meant my house. The same house Benjamin was so desperate to get his hands on. "Can I stay with you for a while?" "I can't go back to his apartment." "Of course, dear. Your room is always waiting for you." The guests gradually dispersed, casting sympathetic glances at us. Mr. Donaldson came over to offer his condolences and assure us that he would do everything in his power to bring Benjamin to justice for defrauding the firm. Hugh was waiting for us at the exit. "I'll drive you home," he offered. "I don't think you both should be driving right now." We didn't argue. Naomi walked uncomfortably beside me, leaning on my arm as if I were her support, not the other way around. Already in the car, Hugh, looking in the rearview mirror at Naomi dozing in the back seat, asked me quietly, "What do you think will happen to those Benjamin's creditors? Could they pose a threat?" I looked at my daughter, so vulnerable now, so broken, and felt a wave of determination rising inside. "I don't know, but if they try to approach us, they'll have to deal with me." Hugh grinned, but there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. "I don't doubt that. Still, maybe I should stay with you for a few days, just in case." I nodded gratefully, looking out the window at the streets of South Charleston whizzing by. There were many challenges ahead: the annulment, the possible lawsuits, the gossiping neighbors. But for the first time in a long time, I felt I could handle it all. Benjamin Prescott wanted to destroy me, to take away what was most precious to me. But instead, he had unwittingly helped me regain what I had long lost: my self-confidence, my relationship with my daughter, and perhaps a new chapter in my life that was just beginning. Already at the police station, Naomi broke down. Until then, she had been remarkably resilient, silent, pale, but collected. She sat across from the investigator, answering endless questions: when she had met Benjamin, what she knew about his past, whether she had noticed anything suspicious. I watched my daughter with a mixture of pride and pain. My Naomi, always so emotional, now resembled a frozen statue. But when the young officer brought her in to sign the last of the papers and said casually, "You may need a lawyer, Mrs. Prescott," something in her broke. Her shoulders shook, her face contorted, and she broke into sobs. "I am not Mrs. Prescott," she shouted through her tears. "I don't even know what his real name is. I married a ghost." The officer was confused, looking helplessly back and forth at me and Hugh, who had stayed with us the whole time. I rushed to my daughter, putting my arm around her shoulders. "Naomi, breathe deeply. Everything is going to be okay." "Nothing is going to be okay." She pushed me away so sharply that I staggered back. "Do you realize what's going to happen now? The whole town will know. Everyone will be whispering behind my back, feeling sorry for me, laughing at me. Poor Naomi, such an idiot, married to a swindler." "No one will laugh," I tried to reassure her. "You're the victim in this situation." "Victim?" she almost shouted. "I don't want to be a victim. I want to be a normal woman with a normal life, with a husband, a home, a family. I had all that yesterday, and today I have nothing." I remained silent, realizing that any words of comfort now would only add fuel to the fire. Naomi needed to vent her pain, her frustration, and I was the most convenient target. "Are you happy?" She gave me a fierce look. "You hated Ben from the beginning, said he was weird, that there was something wrong with him. You wanted it to end this way." "Naomi, that's not fair," I objected quietly. "I never wished for you to be hurt." "Then what did you wish for?" Her voice oozed venom. "For me to be alone? To live with you in this crypt you call home? For us to become two lonely old women together?" Her words hurt, but I realized it wasn't my daughter speaking, but her pain and disappointment. "I wished for you to be happy," I said calmly, "with a man who really loves you and not you're my property." "You know nothing," Naomi shouted out. "Ben loved me. He may have been a con man. He may have lied about his past and his job, but the feelings between us were real." At that moment, the office door opened and a policeman entered. Miss Abbott, the detainee requests to see you. Naomi jumped up, wiping away her tears. He wants to see me? Actually, the officer stammered, he asked to see Mrs. Abbott. With your mother. Naomi froze as if she'd been struck, then slowly sank back in her chair, all the color drained from her face. He wants to see you? Her voice was barely audible. Even now, you, not me. I felt everything inside clench with pain for my daughter. This was the final, cruelest blow Benjamin Prescott had dealt her. I'm not going, I said firmly. I have nothing to say to him. No, go, Naomi objected suddenly, raising a wan gaze to me. Find out what he wants. I need to know. I hesitated. I had absolutely no desire to see this man, much less alone, but Naomi was right. It was better to find out what he was up to. Hugh, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. I'll come with you. I'll wait outside the door. If anything goes wrong, just call out. I nodded gratefully, and we went to the interrogation room where Benjamin was being held. Naomi stayed in the interrogator's office, hunched in her chair, small and lost. Benjamin was waiting for me behind a metal desk, handcuffed. He looked gaunt and aged, as if he'd gone through several years in a few hours. His once flawless hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, but his eyes, cold, calculating, remained the same. Have a seat, Mrs. Abbott. He nodded to the chair opposite. Thank you for agreeing to meet. You have 5 minutes. I remained standing with my arms crossed over my chest. What do you need? He sighed as if I'd disappointed him. Always so uncooperative. You know, that's the quality that attracted me to you from the beginning. You're not like other women your age, gullible, lonely, desperately clinging to any attention. Flattering me is pointless, I cut him off. Speak to the point. All right, he pitched forward. I want to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? I won't press charges against Naomi. I won't say she was privy to my business dealings. My breath caught. What kind of nonsense is that? Naomi didn't know anything. And you're sure? He raised an eyebrow. She never wondered where I got the money for expensive restaurants and gifts on my supposedly entry-level legal salary. Never wondered why I had no friends from the past, no family photos. Why did I insist on such a rushed wedding? I remained silent, stunned by his insolence. You see? Even you doubt, he smiled. Of course, I have no proof of her complicity. But I can be very convincing when I tell stories, and prosecutors like to suspect anyone and everyone. What do you want? I asked, feeling a wave of anger rising inside. Just sign the house over to Naomi. Now, today, officially, with a notary. I laughed. The sound came out harsh and unnatural. Are you out of your mind? You're under arrest for fraud, facing trial and jail, and you're still thinking about my house? Your house is the least on my mind, he snapped back. I need money. It's urgent. The people I owe aren't the type to accept excuses like, sorry, I got arrested. They're coming after me, or what's owed to them. And you think I'm going to give up the house so you can pay off your thugs? Not to me, Naomi, he corrected. She's my legal wife, which means she's entitled to half of my property and my debts. If she owns the house, she can sell it, pay off my creditors, and live in peace. Otherwise, he paused. I can't guarantee her safety. I felt the blood drain from my face. He was threatening my daughter, not directly, but clearly enough. You're disgusting, I whispered. I'm practical, he shrugged, and I do care about Naomi. In my own way, I turned around and headed for the door. Think about it, Mrs. Abbott, he shouted after me. You have 24 hours, then it'll be too late. I went out, slamming the door. Hugh was waiting for me in the hallway, leaning against the wall. What did he want? He asked, seeing the look on my face. blackmailed me. I briefly recounted our conversation. Hugh rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I can get in touch with the feds. If he's really involved with dangerous people, this could go into their jurisdiction. And Naomi? Is she in danger? Maybe. He didn't bother to reassure me with false reassurances. But I don't think these people would go to extreme measures. More likely, they just want their money back. And Prescott is trying to manipulate you, using your fear for your daughter. When we returned to the investigator's office, Naomi had already left. The young officer reported that she had called a cab and asked to be taken to the Oasis Hotel on the outskirts of town. She didn't want to come home with me. I felt tears come to my eyes. Give her time. Hugh touched my shoulder gently. She's on an emotional swing right now. What she thought was reality turned out to be an illusion. She needs to rethink everything. What if Benjamin isn't bluffing? What if these people really are dangerous? I'll have a patrol car keep an eye on the inn, Hugh promised. And your house too, just in case. I drove home alone. Hugh stayed at the station to take care of formalities and organize surveillance. The fall evening was already descending on South Charleston, making the streetlights cast long shadows. The streets seemed empty and unfamiliar, as if I had returned to a city I had once lived in long ago, but had long forgotten. My house greeted me with silence and darkness. I mechanically turned on the light, put on the kettle, and changed into my clothes. All these mundane actions seemed strangely inappropriate after everything that had happened. It was as if I was trying to pretend it was an ordinary day. But it was no ordinary day. Today, my daughter married and divorced, gained and lost, loved and hated. Today, I came face to face with a man who wanted to take everything from me, and I defeated him. Or did I just think I had won? I sat in the chair by the window, the same one Henry liked to sit in, reading the evening paper. What would he do in my place? What would he say? Henry had always been a practical man. Love is love, Audrey, he used to say, but a house should be a fortress. He put not only money into this house, but his soul. Every weekend he would fix something, improve something, transform something. This house was his legacy, his message to Naomi and me. I took care of you. I protected you. I gave you shelter. And now some bastard wanted to take that away from us, to use Henry's life's work to pay off his dark debts. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my reverie. Hugh stood on the doorstep with a bag from the Chinese restaurant in his hands. Thought you must have missed dinner, he said, as if we'd parted not a couple hours ago, but yesterday. Can I come in? I stepped aside, letting him into the house. Hugh looked around, and suddenly I saw my home through his eyes, cozy but a little old-fashioned, with worn carpets and faded curtains, a house that remembered better days. Nothing has changed, he remarked as he passed into the living room. Same clock, same pictures. Why change what works? I tried to smile, but it didn't come out very convincingly. We settled into the kitchen. Hugh laid out containers of noodles, fried rice, and chicken in sweet and sour sauce. I pulled out plates and chopsticks. I still had a whole set from the days when Henry and I often ordered Chinese food on Fridays. I talked to the investigator, Hugh said, putting the rice on. They checked Prescott's bank accounts. Empty. Everything he had went to the wedding and the ostentatious high life. What about his creditors? No leads yet, but I've asked them to check his phone contacts. Maybe we can get a lead on this Corey guy. He was clearly the middleman. I pick at my noodles thoughtfully with my chopsticks. How did you even get on to Benjamin? Why did you start checking him out? Hugh set the chopsticks aside and looked at me for a long moment. You remember Eliza Morgan? I nodded. Eliza was a mutual acquaintance of ours, the widow of a bank director who lived in a large mansion on Hillcrest Avenue, 3 blocks from me. 2 years ago, she was ripped off by some con man, posed himself as a financial advisor, gained her trust, and then disappeared with her savings. She was so humiliated, she didn't even go to the police. She only told me, and that by accident, when I visited her after the operation. He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I started digging, unofficially, just out of curiosity, and found that there were similar cases in 3 neighboring states: single wealthy women, financial advisor, large sums of money disappearing. The descriptions of the fraudster differed. Somewhere he was blonde, somewhere he was brunette, changed his name, but the MO was the same. And you think it was Benjamin? I wasn't sure until I saw him today. But yeah, now I have little doubt. Slippery type. Changes appearances and names, but the essence stays the same. I shuddered, imagining how close Naomi had been to becoming another victim of this man. Why would he switch from elderly widows to a young woman? I asked. Naomi isn't rich, but she has you, Hugh replied simply, and a house that's worth a fortune. Maybe he decided to change tactics after a few of his scams were exposed. Or maybe he had more pressing debts that needed a quick resolution. I remembered Benjamin in the interrogation room, his words about people who don't accept excuses. Who did he owe debts to, and how dangerous were they? I'm afraid for Naomi, I admitted. She's under police surveillance, Hugh assured me, and it's unlikely these people, whoever they are, will mess with her. She knows nothing and owes them nothing. Benjamin threatened that as his wife she was responsible for his debts. Empty threats, Hugh brushed aside. Legally, that's not true, especially since the marriage was fraudulently arranged and will be annulled. He just wanted to scare you. I calmed down a little, but anxiety for my daughter still gnawed at me from the inside. Naomi blames me for everything, I said quietly. Thinks I ruined her happiness on purpose. She needs time. Hugh gently covered my hand with his. She'll realize you saved her from a much worse fate. We sat in the kitchen until late into the night, talking about the past, about South Charleston, about the people we'd once known. Hugh talked about his work as a private investigator, small cases, mostly adultery and insurance fraud, about his lonely house on the outskirts of town, fishing on weekends, how he sometimes misses real police work. I talked about my quiet life as a retiree, about gardening, about the book club that meets on Thursdays at the city library, about how I'd tried to build a relationship with Naomi over the years, but only grew more and more distant from her. She was always closer to her father, I admitted. When Henry died, something snapped between us. It's like he was the bridge that connected us, and without him, we were on different shores, seeing each other but unable to reach. Maybe this ordeal will bring you closer together, Hugh suggested. Shared pain sometimes connects more strongly than shared joy. I wanted to believe him, but I knew my daughter too well, stubborn, proud, unable to admit mistakes, just like me when I was young. Around midnight, Hugh started home. Are you going to be all right? He asked, standing at the door. Yes, I nodded. Thank you for everything. You're welcome, he smiled. By the way, I've been thinking, when this whole thing is over, why don't we go out? To a movie or dinner? I was confused, not knowing what to say. I'm 56. He's 66. We've both experienced loss. We're both used to being alone. Is it possible to start something new at our age? I mean, just as old friends, he quickly added, noticing my confusion. Sure, I smiled, feeling oddly relieved and slightly disappointed at the same time. As friends, he nodded, hesitated a second longer as if he wanted to add something, but changed his mind and left. I closed the door behind him and leaned my back against it, feeling a strange mix of feelings: tiredness, anxiety, gratitude, and something else I couldn't or wouldn't put a name to. My phone vibrated. A message from Naomi. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. We'll talk tomorrow. Short and dry, but better than nothing. I went up to the bedroom, getting ready for bed. The day had been interminably long and exhausting. Tomorrow, I would have new problems to deal with, talking to lawyers, possibly seeing the police again, calming Naomi down, dealing with the fallout from my failed marriage, but all that would be tomorrow. And today, despite all the turmoil and anxiety, I felt strangely calm. It was as if I'd been through a storm and had finally come to a calm shore, wounded, exhausted, but alive. I looked at Henry's picture on the bedside table. We made it, honey, I whispered. We protected our home, protected Naomi. Now we can rest. And for the first time in months, I fell into a sound, restful sleep, without disturbing dreams or sudden awakenings. It was as if I had finally returned home after a long, exhausting journey. Spring always comes suddenly in South Charleston. Yesterday the town was gray and dreary, and today the apple trees in my garden were suddenly covered with snow-white blossoms, as if it had snowed overnight. I stood at the window with a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight play in the young foliage. It had been 4 months since the day my life had been turned upside down. 4 months that changed everything. Benjamin Prescott, or whatever his real name was under investigation for several cases at once. He was extradited to Ohio, where he was charged with fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of property. Then Kentucky and Pennsylvania victims came forward. The South Charleston newspapers ran headlines like High Society Marriage Swindler, Fraudulent Fiancé Swindled Dozens of Women, and Fake Lawyer in the Dock. Hugh kept me in the loop regularly, getting information from his former colleagues. According to him, Benjamin was facing at least 15 years in prison. His career, not just a phony legal career, but a real fraudulent one, was permanently ruined. You look pacified, Hugh remarked during one of our Saturday lunches. You don't feel any satisfaction at his fall? Strangely, no, I answered honestly. I'm just relieved that he won't be able to fool anyone anymore. I really felt no gloating or lust for revenge. Benjamin was to me simply a danger that had been avoided. Let the justice system decide his fate. It was enough for me to know that my own life no longer belonged to him. Naomi, on the other hand, was more complicated. After that memorable day at the police station, she stayed at the Oasis Hotel for almost 2 weeks, refusing to see me or even talk to me on the phone. All my attempts to contact her ended in short, dry messages. I'm fine. I just need some time. Don't bother me. I respected her desire to be alone, even though my heart was breaking with worry. Hugh assured me the police were still watching over her, and Benjamin's mysterious creditors had never shown up. Maybe he made the whole thing up to put pressure on you, Hugh suggested. Or maybe they decided it would be more costly to get involved with such a high-profile story. Whatever the case, Naomi was safe, physical at least. Her state of mind I could only guess at. In early December, I received a letter from her, a real paper letter, which in itself was unexpected in the age of instant messaging. 3 pages filled with her neat handwriting, which I would have recognized from 1,000. Dear Mother, she wrote, I'm leaving South Charleston. Got a job at a design studio in Asheville, North Carolina. I need a fresh start in a place where no one knows me as the wife of a con artist or the woman who married a con artist. I don't blame you for what happened. You were right about Ben, and that's why I was mad at you. I'm sorry for everything I said at the police station. I don't blame you for my life falling apart, but I need time and distance to put myself back together again. Don't try to contact me. I'll write myself when I'm ready. Naomi. The letter was impeccably polite, but cold. No love you at the end. No promise of an imminent reunion. just a notice of a decision that had already been made. I folded the sheets and tucked them away in the drawer of the secretary where all the important family documents were kept. There was no point in getting angry or resentful. Naomi had always been like that. When she was hurt, she withdrew into herself, just like her father, and so did I. I spent Christmas alone in my big, empty house. I decorated the tree, cooked a traditional dinner, even baked ginger cookies from a recipe Naomi and I had always used when she was little. Hugh offered to keep me company, but I declined. I needed to get over this loneliness, to accept it, to move on. January was snowy and cold. I spent long hours at the window, watching the wind whip snowflakes across the yard. I thought about Naomi, about how she was settling in. I imagined her in some modern office, with new coworkers who knew nothing of her past. I hoped she'd be happy there. In February, I unexpectedly enrolled in a watercolor painting class at a local college. I had never practiced painting before. I didn't have the time. I wasn't confident in my abilities. But now that all the usual pillars of my life were shaken, I wanted to try something completely new. "You've never painted before?" The instructor, a young woman with a mop of red hair, asked in surprise. "You definitely have talent. Look how transparent the shadows are in your still life." I didn't believe her, thinking she was just encouraging a beginner. But gradually, I began to notice that my work was really getting better. Watercolor is a capricious technique that requires patience and acceptance of imperfections. You can't fix every mistake. You have to either start over or incorporate the blunders into the overall composition, turning them into something beautiful. In some ways, it resembled life. In March, I received a second letter from Naomi, shorter this time, but warmer. "Mom, I'm doing well. The work is interesting. The team is friendly. I found a small apartment with a view of the mountains. I'm sending photos. Not ready to come yet, but maybe we could Skype next Sunday?" Naomi, the letter was accompanied by a photo, a small studio apartment with a large window overlooking the forested mountains. On the windowsill were several pots of plants. I recognized the ficus Naomi had given me for her 30th birthday, so she'd taken it with her. For some reason, the thought warmed me from the inside out. Our first Skype conversation was awkward. We discussed the weather, her job, my neighbors, any safe topic, avoiding any mention of Benjamin or the events of last fall. But at the end of the conversation, Naomi suddenly said, "You know, I was walking by an antique store the other day and saw a clock in the window, just like the one we have in our living room. Suddenly, I just wanted to go home so badly." She stopped talking, biting her lip. I could see tears glistening in her eyes, but I didn't point it out. We were both too proud for overt displays of weakness. "Your room is waiting for you," I said simply. "When you're ready." After that conversation, something changed. We started calling once a week. We talked about the present, about plans for the future. Little by little, the ice between us melted. I didn't push. I didn't question. I didn't try to force a reconciliation. I was just there, as close as I could be at a distance of 300 miles. And my own life was changing too. The painting courses introduced me to a whole group of interesting people, mostly women my age, who were also looking for new hobbies in their later years. We began to meet not only at classes, but also outside of them. We organized joint trips to museums, picnics, board game nights. "You have such a busy social life now," Hugh teased me. "Soon there won't be time for old friends at all." But he was wrong. Our meetings with him became not less frequent, but deeper. We were no longer just having lunch together on Saturdays, discussing the news of the city and the Benjamin case. Now we went to movies, concerts in the park, once even got out fishing, though I never caught a fish. "I never thought I'd start dating like a teenager at 68, I confided to him after watching a romantic comedy he'd dragged me to. assuring me it would have an interesting plot about spies. And I'm 69 and I feel about 17 years old. He laughed. Maybe that's the secret? Old age is when you stop wondering and trying new things. On an April morning, exactly 6 months after Naomi's ill-fated wedding, I opened my front door and found a large envelope on my doorstep. Inside was a file folder and a short note. Thank you for your help with the Prescott case. I think you'll be interested to hear the results of the investigation. Detective Morgan. I spent the afternoon studying the contents of the folder. Hugh joined me in the evening, and together we pieced together the tangled history of the scams. Benjamin Prescott, aka Brandon Pierce, aka Barton Price, aka 5 other different identities he'd created over the past 10 years. It's amazing how long he's managed to stay uncaught, Hugh remarked as he looked over the reports. Though, come to think of it, not so amazing. Most of his victims were too embarrassed or humiliated to report him to the police. Except Eliza Morgan, I reminded him. And you. He squeezed my hand gently. You both turned out stronger than he expected. There were pictures in the folder, too. Benjamin in different images, with different women. In one picture, he was blonde, with glasses and a beard, not at all like the burly lawyer who'd walked into my house 6 months ago. And yet I recognized his eyes cold, calculating, with that special glint that comes when a predator sees prey. What about his creditors? I asked, flipping through the pages. Did they actually exist? Oh, they still do. Hugh tapped his finger on one of the reports. A local criminal gang out of Cincinnati. Prescott owed them a large sum of money after a failed underground casino scam. They did threaten him, but fortunately for everyone, his arrest and high-profile case scared them off. Too much police and FBI attention. I breathed a sigh of relief. It was one thing to know in my mind that the danger was over, and quite another to have it documented. So, it's over. I closed the folder. He'll get his time and we can forget about him. Well, the trial is still to come, but yeah, it's essentially over. Although, Hugh smiled slyly, I'd say it's just beginning for you and me. I smiled back, feeling a warming in my chest. Who would have thought that at my age, life could take such an unexpected turn? And the next day came a message from Naomi. Mom, I have a vacation in May. Can I come for a week? I reread those words over and over again, unable to believe my happiness. My daughter wants to come back, at least for a while, but to come home. Naomi arrived in the first days of May, when the garden was full of blooming lilacs. I met her at the train station, slimmer, with a new haircut, but with the same stubborn crease between her eyebrows that I knew so well. We hugged, awkwardly but sincerely. You look good, she said, looking me over with mild surprise. Some kind of younger. New hobby? I shrugged. Watercolor works wonders. And a new man, she smiled, noticing my embarrassment. Yeah, don't hold back. Mrs. Parker from across the street told me all about it when I called her to see how you were doing. Always that old gossipy girl watching everyone, I grumbled, but without irritation. Let her watch if she was so interested. At home, Naomi spent a long time walking through the rooms, touching familiar things, looking at pictures, as if rediscovering the place where she'd grown up. Nothing has changed, she said as she entered her old room. Why would anything change? I shrugged. It's our home. It accepts us for who we are. She sat down on her bed, running her hand over the old patchwork bedspread I'd sewn back for her 16th birthday. You know, back in Asheville, I used to think about home a lot, about Ben trying to take it away, and how you defended it like it was a living thing. Because it's alive, I replied simply. Here, every floorboard holds our footsteps. Every wall holds our conversations. Everything here is soaked in our memories, both good and bad. Naomi nodded, looking out the window where an apple tree was dropping white petals onto the green grass. I never understood why you clung to that old house so much. It seemed to me that you were clinging to the past, unwilling to move forward. She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. And then, when Ben started talking about the house as a financial asset, about how much money you could make on it, I suddenly realized that to him, it was just walls and a roof, square footage that could be sold. But for us, for you, it's part of who you are. I sat down next to her on the bed, taking her hand gently. This house isn't going anywhere, Naomi. It will be waiting for you whenever you decide to come back. The week flew by. Naomi and I discussed a lot, not only past events, but also our own relationship, dragging on years of resentments and misunderstandings. It wasn't easy. Sometimes we shouted, sometimes we cried, but gradually we found common ground, getting to know each other anew. I'd like you to meet Hugh, I said the day before she left. He's done a lot for us. I'd love to, she smiled. It's about time you met the man who makes my mom blush at the mere mention of him. Hugh arrived for dinner, bringing a bouquet of wildflowers for Naomi and a bottle of good wine for all of us. He was in his best suit, clean-shaven and clearly nervous, like a teenager on a first date with a girl's parents. Only in reverse, he was getting to know his daughter, who was I to him? A girlfriend? A partner? We hadn't even defined that between ourselves yet. Nice to finally meet you, Naomi. He shook her hand. Heard a lot about you. Hopefully not just the bad. She smiled slyly, casting a glance at me. Oh, your mother always speaks of you with pride, Hugh assured her, even when she complains about your stubbornness. Apple of the apple, Naomi laughed, and I realized with surprise that she was flirting with Hugh, not like a woman with a man, but like a daughter evaluating a potential stepfather and deciding to approve. Dinner passed easily and casually. We talked about the painting course, about Naomi's new job, about fishing, which Hugh was passionate about. Not a word about Benjamin or past events. It was a territory we had tacitly decided not to enter that evening. After dessert, Hugh suddenly said, I have a proposition for both of you. I'm going on vacation at the end of June 2 weeks on the coast, in a little town called Ocracoke. I've rented a house by the ocean, with a veranda and a view of the lighthouse. Would you like to join me? He was addressing both of us, but he was looking at me. I felt my cheeks warm under his gaze. You know I've never been on the ocean, I said quietly. That's exactly why I'm suggesting it. He smiled. It's time to remedy that omission. Great idea, Naomi exclaimed. I was just about to invite you to Asheville, Mom, but the ocean sounds even better. I'll ask for a couple extra days off and we can all go together. All together? I looked at her in surprise. Sure, she shrugged. The three of us are more fun. If Hugh doesn't mind, of course. I'd be delighted, he replied, and I could see he meant it sincerely. The more company, the more interesting. Then it's settled. Naomi clapped her hands together. A vacation by the ocean. Mom, you'll need to buy a swimsuit, and sunglasses, and a sun hat. Oh, and sunscreen too. I listened to her list the necessities and felt a warmth spill inside. My daughter was herself again, energetic, enthusiastic. She was making plans that included me, U.S. It was like a miracle. The next day, I walked Naomi to the train station. We hugged without the awkwardness of before. I'll call you when I get there, she promised, and I'll send you a list of things to pack for your trip to the ocean. Don't forget to bring your watercolor supplies. There's bound to be some amazing vistas to paint. I watched her board the train, waving at me from the window. My heart clenched at the impending separation, but it was a light sadness. I knew that now she would be back. Not for good, perhaps, but our bond was restored, stronger than before. Hugh came to see me in the evening for no reason at all. We sat on the veranda with cups of tea, watching the sun set behind the roofs of the neighboring houses. Naomi is a wonderful girl, he said, as strong and independent as her mother. And just as stubborn, I added with a smile. That's a family trait too, he winked at me. You do realize that she approved of our relationship? Whatever it is. Yes, I nodded. I was surprised by that. I thought she'd be against it. Why? Because I'm too old? Or too much like a rural sheriff from a western? I laughed. Because she's always had a hard time accepting that there could be anyone in my life other than her father. Hugh stirred the tea in his cup thoughtfully. I guess what happened with Benjamin changed her perspective on a lot of things. Sometimes we need to lose things to realize the value of what we have. I looked at my house, old but sturdy, holding the history of several generations, at the apple tree in the garden, strewn with flowers, at Hugh sitting next to me, so calm and reliable. Are you sure you want to take us both on vacation? I asked. Naomi and I can sometimes be rather intense. I was a cop for 30 years, he grinned. I think I can handle two stubborn Abbott women. Don't be so sure. I jokingly nudged him with my elbow. We might surprise you. That's what I'm counting on. He covered my hand with his. So, do you agree to go? See the ocean, try the local oysters, maybe even go swimming? I can't swim, I warned. I'll teach you, he promised. At 69, I'm still a pretty passable swimmer. And I, at 68, may not be the most capable student. Never mind, he shrugged. The point is to try new things. Isn't that the point? I looked at him, gray-haired, with wrinkles in the corners of his eyes from frequent smiles, with the strong hands of a man used to work, not a prince from a fairy tale, not a romantic hero from the movies Naomi loved so much, just a good, dependable man who'd appeared in my life at the most difficult moment and stayed when the storm had subsided. In that, I agreed, to try something new. Together. We sat on the veranda until it got dark, talking about the trip ahead, the things we'd do in retirement, the books we wanted to read, the places we dreamed of seeing. Two not young people who found each other at a time in life when many people have given up looking. The house around us held silence, cozy, peaceful, full of promise. I knew that Naomi would come back, if not to live, then to visit, that Hugh would stay, not always there, but always nearby, that life goes on changing, opening up new possibilities even when it seems all roads have been traveled. Here's to new beginnings. Hugh raised his cup in a joking toast. Here's to new beginnings, I echoed, tapping my cup with his. And here's to not being afraid to embrace them.